Africa. Malupaganisu pondolwayo. Izwa imithandazo yethu. Nkosi sikelela thina lusapho lwa kasitshaba sa Yesu ufedise tintwa le matswenye usibuluke sitshaba sa Yesu sitshaba sa South Africa, South Africa. 80 blow fanon se yemo, 80 deep de fanon se. Oren sieva ha betes, var die grense antwoord hier. Sounds the call to come together, and united we shall stand. Let us live and strive for freedom in South Africa, our land.
Thank you. As we are about to start our official program, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce myself as the chair of the session. I'd like to welcome all of you. I'd like to, in particular, recognize dignitaries that are with us. I believe the president of the SCA is going to be with us. I want to recognize the judges of the Constitutional Court that are with us, Justice Madlanga. I saw also Judge Ledwaba, the Judge President of the division of this province. We welcome you. The judges of all our high courts that are here, and all the members of the judiciary in our midst. We would also like to welcome and recognize the members of the executive that are present with us. In particular, notice the Deputy Minister, Jeffrey, members of Parliament and Provincial Legislature who are with us, and any councillors who might be in our midst. We also want to recognize and acknowledge members of the diplomatic corps that are with us, the international guests, leaders of fraternal organization, the chair of the LPC who is with us, the co-chair of the LSSA, should he have joined us, the president of BLA, who is with us as well, as we are about to start this program, which we hope will be a very interesting AGM in terms of formulating the policy discussions that will be happening over the next 2 or so days. We really welcome you here. On that note, I will welcome the JP and invite you, JP, to give us your welcoming address. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you very much for giving me the podium. I also want to thank the leadership of NADEL for being protocol compliant and request the JP of the province in which they are active to welcome everyone formally. Otherwise, you would all have been under threat. I won't mention what. But let me also be protocol compliant. I want to recognize the colleagues from the Constitutional Court, Justice Madlanga, Acting Justice Ledwaba, the DM, the President of the BLA, the President of NADEL, other leadership structures here. I think the program director, has welcomed you all. The former president of the BLA is also here. So forgive me if I don't mention you, but rest assured, I'm protocol compliant. But I want to also take this opportunity to single out one individual. I didn't warn him, but I'm going to do this. He was part of the JSC that opened my path in the judiciary in 1997 when I was interviewed for the Labor Court judgeship. Babu Sbanyon, I welcome you here, sir. Thank you very much for those questions you asked me then. I hope you don't regret recommending me because I'm no longer in the Labor Court, but anyway. Folks, my task is a simple one, to formally welcome you to Gauteng, to this province, for your conference. But I thought, let me just make a few remarks regarding the theme of your conference. Poverty, inequality, and corruption, symptoms of a state in gradual decline. It's a catchy theme. And in my welcoming address, I want to say, I want to wish you well in your deliberations in tackling that subject. It's an important subject. Daily, we hear shocking stories about allegations of how public funds are being misused, are being misappropriated. And if you want to quote me, I said allegations. And I mean it, it's allegations. But one has a sense of shock every time you hear. You know, I stop in a garage to pour petrol. And the petrol attendant would say, "Hey, Ndade Mlambo, you are a judge, ne?" Yes. But tell me, if someone steals 100 million, I don't even know how many knots there are in this figure. And I look at what I earn here. I struggle to bring up my family, honestly, and I earn so little, and someone steals 100 million, and they are so arrogant, and nothing is happening to them. What are you guys doing? I said, well, you know, it's easy to duck questions like that, but those are legitimate concerns that are being raised. We've heard all these things for some time now. South African society wants to see action. But I mentioned that just to say I want to wish you fruitful and productive deliberations. I hope at the end of your AGM, you will have adopted realistic and implementable resolutions. I hate the prospect of coming and talking and walking away and not caring what happens in what I've been saying. So that's why I'm saying in my welcome, I want to wish you well. Have the presence of mind to understand the context we are in as a country and what you can do as a legal profession, as an association in the legal profession, about arresting the decline that has not gone unnoticed from the men in the street. One issue I thought I'll leave you to consider, talk about, is the malfeasance I see in the courts. You are active in the courts as legal practitioners. You know, there's internal malfeasance that's orchestrated and encouraged by members of the profession. Ordinary loss of files, loss of court documents, the paying of, I mean, someone coined the phrase that in Pretoria, if you want a file, you need to pay airtime to the court staff. Now, why should legal practitioners pay someone to do a job that he or she is paid to do? Because when you don't pay, then you'll be told, like the citizen said, you look for files, you don't get them. Because you have made them get accustomed to getting airtime to look for those files. If you come, you're honest, you don't give them airtime, they won't look for those files, they'll tell you the file is lost. This is all lawyer-driven. But I can give you details. If you want to challenge me, I can give you details about how members of the profession are behind the falsification of court orders. You sit in court, you hear your matter has been dismissed, you go and ensure that the court typists type an order that says you won, and you go and execute on the basis of that falsified court order. That's what members of the profession are doing. Please, guys, this is a serious matter. But one issue, before my 5 minutes ends, is the road accident fund gravy train that lawyers are on. DJP Lidwaba decided to go to the Constitutional Court to say, JP, I'm tired of dealing with these matters. Maybe Judge Raulinga will do a better job. It is a gravy train in the truest of terms. A gravy train for lawyers leading the pack. A gravy train for other experts, medical professionals. How can we be proud as an institution that's supposed to be hearing and making sense of disputes and deciding them, writing learned judgments, but to be confronted with draft orders? We have 120 matters on the roll daily. 100 of them daily are RAF matters. Of that 100, don't be surprised if 88 or even all 100 end up in draft orders. And what does a draft order say? RAF has considered merits. We've agreed to settle quantum. But some judges start looking at what's in the file. You claim $1 million, the RAF agrees to settle for brain damage. When the judge goes in the file, find that there was no brain damage. There was an abrasion of the ankle. The RAF has considered and agreed to settle. And when you look at the costs that have to be paid, they are lined up. It's the lawyers, the advocates, the brain specialists, everyone is there. If you count these costs per matter, why are we surprised the RAF is always bankrupt? That's why I'm saying it's a gravy train. You know that what I'm saying is true. If you want to contradict me, I'll be here today. You can ask me. I'll give you details. So I'm saying, I'm raising this thing to you, that you are members of an honorable profession. Bring that honor back to the profession. You are an association of legal professionals. Please, it's always a good start to take stock of what's going wrong. I'm not going to talk about the striking offs that we deal with. I've spoken ad infinitum about the numbers of people who are struck off each week. But they are promptly replaced by other people who do the same thing, even worse. Folks, please, I'm JP. I don't want to be forced to take drastic action and start being accused. But at some stage, you watch this space. At some stage, we will do something very drastic. We will stop that gravy train to make sure that whatever has to go through a judge's table is something that belongs there. How possible is it that every matter that comes to roll call, that's the trial date, it ends up in a draft order. Every matter, you will fall if you find an RAF matter that settles before it comes to trial. Why? Ask yourself that question. So folks, I'm saying it's a serious matter. I'm encouraging you in part of your deliberations as you open this AGM to take that issue seriously and address it. And once more, welcome to Gauteng. I'm sorry I welcomed you with this. I wanted to shock you to make sure that you don't lose focus. But thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, JP, for this conscientious opening and welcoming speech. Fortunately, the chair of the Legal Practice Council is here, and I see some members of the Practice Council. They will take note of what is being said, that we do need to act ethically and be proactive to make sure that we really are an honorable profession. Thank you again, JP. Our program is a little bit behind schedule. I will quickly move on to call our guests who will be making or giving messages of support. And at this juncture, I will call our Ambassador Merida, Ambassador to Venezuela, to give us a message of support.
Thank you very much. Good morning. I am very happy to be here again. Always I feel a part of the family of NADEL. Good morning to all of you, Mr. Mbuso Nogesi, President of NADEL, the Vice President, the Secretary General, distinguished guests, and all members of NADEL in general. Thank you very much for the invitation and to partake once again with you. Like I told you, I feel already part of the family of NADEL. This is my fourth year that I share with you in this conference. And on behalf of the Embassy of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela and the government that I represent, I want to extend my sincere congratulations to NADEL for their work, for their achievement, and for the keeping up the struggle for an egalitarian society, promoting and defending the constitutional order to guarantee justice, among many other things. I also want to thank highly the support of NADEL to the Bolivarian Revolution that for several years has been under threat and permanent attack by the US empire. And to President Mbuso for accepting our invitation and for participating as international observer in May 20 last year for the presidential elections. The last events in Venezuela begin with the non-recognition of last year's presidential elections by part of some opposition parties that did not want to participate in it, and also by the US government and its allies. As you know, in this moment, the progressive forces in Latin America are under attack, especially Cuba, Nicaragua, Bolivia, and Venezuela. On January 23 this year, I don't know how to call him, he's member of the parliament, no? And the member of parliament, Juan Guaidó, on instruction from US, declared himself president in the Republic of Venezuela. He went to a square and said, I self-declare President of the Republic of Venezuela. In less than 5 minutes, the US and its allies, the Lima Group in Latin America, agreed to recognize the new president. It was clearly seen that the plan was mounted long time ago. From the moment that the opposition did not want to sign the agreement between the government and the opposition, emerged from the roundtable discourse held in Dominican Republic between December 2017 and February 2018, then a part of the opposition did not want to participate in the election, convened to make last year on 20 May, in which all the guarantee established by our Constitution, and that President Mpofu can attest to that. He was part of the South African delegation that joined the more than 200 international observers who participate in this election, in which the President Nicolás Maduro won with 67% of the voters. In case of Venezuela, can become a case for a study in legal environment. Since the Venezuelan opposition, the government of the United States and its allies have flagrantly violated the Constitution of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, the international law, the United Nations Charter, and all the laws that have stood in their way, with sole objective of overthrow the government of the President Nicolás Maduro and seize all the natural resources in our country. The wish of the opposition, backed by the United States government, is to achieve control and power in Venezuela, to overthrow a constitutional government democratically elected by popular will, is taking ruthless and terrorist actions against the people to extremes. As they have failed, they achieve their objectives so far, because they did very bad on 23 of February last month, when they wanted to carry out a military intervention disguised as an alleged humanitarian aid. And that they burned themselves, and they wanted to blame President Nicolás Maduro. But despite being denounced by the government, while Telesur report exactly what happened, it was not until last weekend when the New York Times said it was not Maduro. That was the opposition on the Colombian side who burned the humanitarian aid. Thus, the world learned the truth that they wanted to hide. And of course, none of the accusers have apologies. What they said, what the New York Times was misinforming, and that President Maduro was possibly paid them to say that information. Sorry. They will continue to look for other ways: more sanctions, financial blockade, millions of fines to Venezuelan state, electrical sabotage, among others. Do you know, from almost 5 years ago, we have a strong economic blockade and a lot of economic sanctions that but that no permit to our government to buy anything outside, to buy medicine, to buy food, to make any international transaction, nothing. And until now, we have from just this year, the government of Venezuela sent the money to the embassies, and the banks blockade the transaction and back the money. Twice, 3 times this year. We can't receive anything. And also to buy medicine, to buy food, nothing. And the government of the United States threatened all the banks around the world. If they work with Venezuela, they also will have sanctions. We want to inform about the sabotage, the electrical sabotage against the electrical system of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela last week. That since the afternoon of the 7th of March until 11th of March, affect the Venezuelan population. Several cybernetic and electromagnetic high-tech attacks caused failures in the computerized system of the Guri hydroelectric power plant, which supply more than 70% of the electricity in our country. The evidence that is sabotage against this system is based on the impossibility that a failure of such magnitude obey to other reasons. That is to say, this type of system does not fail for themselves, and there must have been a manipulation that made them fail. The same reason excludes the possibility of lack of maintenance in equipment or lack of generation. That is to say, all the turbines should be failed simultaneously, and the absolute and sudden non-existence of any level of water should have caused the system to collapse that way. This practically was a war between hackers, no? They attacked our system, our hacker restored the system, and they was 3 days terrible for our population. And they was to create the fake news around the world that in Venezuela many people dead for cause of the electricity. They say that the hospital didn't have support, but was not true. They sent a Twitter with say that more than 80 people dead and newborn, but was not true. Was not true. Everything is okay now. Before the electricity problem, it was good, and now, unfortunately, our country is okay. But it is unprecedented to see how a spokesperson from the United States and the Venezuelan opposition through social network boast about the situation when we are seeing that it violates fundamental human rights of the Venezuelan population. In view of the precedent argument, it is necessary that the governments of the world and the government in the world ponder and demand the respect of the international law and guarantee of the peace and the future of the new generation. The Venezuelan people, along with the government led by the constitutional President Nicolás Maduro, reiterate its call to the countries of the world to not contribute with an armed intervention in Venezuela, to promote the dialogue within the framework of our Constitution, and to stop the criminal economic blockade that prevents the normal supply of food and medicines to Venezuelans. The problem of Venezuela must be solved by the Venezuelans without external pressures, control, and impositions. Venezuela is a country of peace. We only demand respect for the principle of international relations, international law, and the United Nations Charter. And I want to finish to invite again to the teams of NADEL, the president of NADEL, to organize one group, one team to visit Venezuela, to go to see the reality in our country, and to meet with different institutions, lawyer institutions, to discuss about the situation in Venezuela. The invitation is open. No, I hope to receive feedback as soon as possible to organize the visit from NADEL to Venezuela. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Merida. At this point, we are going to call our ambassador to Cuba, Ambassador Vessin. I'm not sure if our ambassador is here with us. Yes, yes. We will call you, say. We really ask that we stick to the 5 minutes. The chair doesn't want to be sending notes to our speakers, but we are indeed behind time, so we'd like to catch up with them. Welcome to you, sir.
Well, good morning. First of all, let me convey my deep appreciation to the leadership and the members of NADEL for inviting me to participate on behalf of Cuba on this important event. And of course, I wish all of you great success in your conference. And with all protocol observed, let me start. Dear friends, in a world dominated by the capitalist system and characterized by workers' exploitation, individualism, greed, and inequality, Cuba has shown that it is possible to create an alternative society based on human solidarity and social justice. We do not intend the Cuban socialist revolution to be considered a model to anyone, but neither do we accept the imposition of the capitalist system as a unique and universal model. Cuba is not perfect. There are many things yet to be achieved in Cuba, but there are also many achievements to show. Some 815 million persons in the world suffer today from chronic hunger, and 760 million adults are illiterate. No one of them is Cuban. As a result of poverty, 18,000 children die in our planet every day, and 325 million children do not attend school. No one of them is Cuban. We are proud to be a country that provides high-quality health care and education at all levels to all our population, completely free of charge. We are proud to be a country where life expectancy rate is almost 80 years of age, higher than in many rich countries. We are also proud to have the highest number of doctors per capita in the world, and one of the best, thank you, and one of the best infant mortality rates. The Cuban Revolution is and will remain a revolution by the working class and for the working class. Dear friends, the imperialists will always try to neutralize and isolate those who challenge them and defend sovereignty and the interests of the working class. Since 1960, Cuba has suffered from a criminal and illegal economic, commercial, and financial blockade imposed by the US government. It is the longest blockade ever recorded in the history of humanity. The blockade causes harm and deprivations to the Cuban people. It is also a flagrant violation of the international law and the Charter of the United Nations. By the way, the United Nations has approved in the last 28 years, 28 resolutions demanding the end of the blockade. But ignoring the UN, the present government of the United States has decided to strengthen even more the blockade and hostility against Cuba and also against Venezuela, as my sister, the ambassador of Venezuela, clearly explained. In the last few years, as you probably know, the correlation of forces in Latin America has significantly changed in detriment of the progressive and revolutionary governments. In that context, the US government is implementing a strategy to exert greater influence over Latin America and to reshape our region. The new US policy towards Latin America, announced in November last year, is based on a direct and more aggressive confrontation against Cuba and Venezuela in order to impose a regime change in our countries. That's the formal, open, new policy of the US towards Latin America. Cuba does not want confrontation, but we will not accept threats or blackmail from the United States. The change that may be necessary in Cuba will be decided only by the Cuban people and nobody else. Many wonder how the Cuban Revolution has resisted 60 years of hostility and blockade from the world superpower. In responding to that, and probably there are many answers to that, but in responding to that, I just want to emphasize on one key element: unity. The construction of unity and social cohesion is the most important task facing all true revolutions. Commander Fidel Castro always emphasized in the importance of unity. He was capable of uniting the Cubans in order to be able to resist, fight, and win. That's why I can assure today to all members of NADEL that US government dreams of regime change in Cuba will fail, as it was the case with the previous 11 US administrations that tried to defeat the Cuban Revolution. To conclude, dear friends, I would like to tell you that we should act together in solidarity. In isolation, we will be swallowed by the powerful. The struggle for social justice has no borders. Solidarity with other people of the world must be an essential quality of all revolutionaries. Cuba will forever be thankful to NADEL for rejecting the US blockades and aggressions against our country. We thank you for supporting our demand that Cuba's right to self-determination and sovereignty be respected. Cuba is determined to continue fighting together with you for a better world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. What an inspiring speech of what is possible as we traverse the issues that are our theme for this AGM. Thank you again. We will now call, I don't see the LSA State Co-Chair, I will now call upon the BLA President, Mr. Sigogo, to come give his message of support.
Thank you, Program Director. It is indeed an honor for the BLA to be amongst you. We feel very honored to be invited to come and share a message of support with you. Comrade President, protocol has been observed, but allow me to recognize you, allow me to recognize the Deputy Minister, allow me to recognize the Judge of the Constitutional Court as well as the JP of Gauteng and all members of judiciary who are with us here. I'm not alone, Comrade President. As you have seen, I'm with the past president of the BLA with me. I'm with the current deputy president of the BLA, who have all accompanied me to come and share this message of support with you. The Black Lawyers Association does not accommodate nor tolerate corruption. BLA, like you are doing today, tackled the issue of corruption in our country in its National General Meeting of May 2018. We are aware that corruption is cancer that do not only eats on the nation's fabric, but it also erodes people's trust to their government, institutions, and it brews interpersonal mistrust. We know that amongst others, the ills of corruption are that it increases the cost of living, it reduces investment incentives, and hampers economic growth, with the obvious consequences of stretching the gap between the rich and the poor. Most sadly, corruption steals from the poor, hence it deepens poverty and inequality in any society. Corruption teaches our youth that hard work and integrity are values not worth pursuing, as the corrupt are seen to be materially successful than the noble and the honest. Corruption fosters the culture of not studying and thereby robs us of the intellectuals. It is concerning that most of the time, when people speak of corruption, we have in our minds public sector corruption. We give less thought on the role played by private sector and individuals in the sustenance of corruption. There is no incentive for government departments to commit corruption with each other, but there is when private sector and individuals are involved. Greed by both public officials and private individuals is the cause of corruption. Therefore, for us to tackle corruption, it must start with us, private individuals, who should not agree to or succumb to demands of corruption from public servants. I believe we must take this matter further and ask ourselves on the role played by professionals as enablers of corruption. What role are lawyers playing as enablers of corruption? The same question has relevance with respect to the medical practitioners, engineers, and accountants. As professionals, we have a duty to protect our democracy, and we will be failing in our duty if we do not fight corruption, but provide professional advice aimed at flourishing corruption. Corruption will not go away if we do not take decisive steps against those who are guilty thereof. Equally, our legislative framework must call a spade a spade. We see terminologies which are used in our acts, and we believe as the Black Lives Association that this also enables corruption. For example, we talk of money laundering, we talk of racketeering, we talk of collusion, we speak of fronting, we call it fraud, we call it bribery, sometimes we call it white-collar crime. This is nothing but crime. This is corruption. All these things are nothing, and if we do not stand up, this corruption will flourish. They are theft. People who commit them are nothing but thieves. Worse for them, they are stealing from all of us, and most importantly, from the poor. They are contributing to the decay of our state. They are the main contributors to the state of poverty our people find themselves in. They are responsible for the unequal society South Africa is today. For lawyers to pay medical practitioners and hospital employees to refer clients to them is nothing but corruption. To call it touting, it sounds like it's less evil and is educated. This is theft, is corruption. In India, it is reported, doctors today are paying ambulance drivers to refer patients to them. And we've seen, and it is coming also in our country, if we do not stop the scourge of corruption, very soon, patients in our hospitals are going to pay for their bed letters to be drawn by the clerks. And further to that, our patients will be required to pay doctors to treat them. This is what is going to if we do not stand up. And that's why we're coming here today as the Black Lives Association Comrade President to support your conference, because we believe that if you stand up and all of us play our role, we are going to win this fight against corruption. As I conclude, President, allow me to wish you a successful conference. And I believe from the deliberations that we are going to have as an organization, we are going to find some answers to this corruption. The Black Lives Association and NADEL, under your leadership and my leadership, have come more closer than before. And we must thank our previous presidents, previous Mabunda and previous Botswana. You will recall, for the first time in a long time, the two organizations held joint NEC meetings. They held Your organization attended to our youth forum launch, and we are going to have a common Women's Day together. And as well, we're also going to have an imbizo on the transformation of the legal profession. So it shows we are working together, and if we put our efforts even more, we believe we are going to do more things for our members, the profession, and the country. I thank you, President.
Thank you, Mr. Sekoko. We note the unity between the two organizations, and it's welcome. What is it? At this point, I will call Ms. Lepu, the chairperson of the Legal Practice Council, to give her message of support.
Program Director, our Judge President of Gauteng, members of the judiciary who are present, the President of NADEL, Mr. Mpofu, the members of the National Executive Council of NADEL, legal practitioners. As a chairperson of the newly established Legal Practice Council, it is indeed my honor and privilege to be invited to this auspicious occasion. On behalf of my council, I hereby convey a message of support to this tried and tested organization, which has been in the forefront of the liberation of our country and the struggle for democracy, the upholding of the rule of law, and the independence of our profession. Program Director, the theme of your conference, Poverty, Inequality, and Corruption, Symptoms of a State in Gradual Collapse, is clearly an indication that since NADEL was established in 1987, the fight has not been won, and is far from being won. NADEL is one of the organizations which vigorously lobbied for the establishment of the Legal Practice Act. Ironically, it took more than 10 years, 10 painful discussions, negotiations between progressive organizations to give birth to the Legal Practice Act. The reasons of the lengthened period are well known to us, as some of our colleagues wanted to preserve the status quo, even though the country has moved forward. Finally, it happened. We have all entered uncharted territory with regards to the Legal Practice Act. Although we profess to be champions of democracy, draft legislation for others to follow, we were the last to come to the table in finalizing the Legal Practice Act and regulate our own profession. Other professions have moved far ahead, but we are still grappling with how to move forward, and there are those who are still fighting for their own territory and not wanting to be regulated. However, we must be comforted by the fact that we still have organizations like NADEL who are still in the forefront of changing our country for the better by convening such discussions around upholding the rule of law, access to justice, and to the profession. With the continuous vigorous activism of progressive organizations like yourselves, poverty, inequality, corruption, and any possible collapse of our state will be averted. We all know and appreciate that the Legal Practice Act is not perfect. A lot needs to be done to it, but it is a start. There are those who may use its ambiguity to frustrate its objectives for their own narrow interests. All of us should stand up and not allow it. What we cannot ignore is that our profession is under siege. The ethical standards are fastly being eroded by a few of our colleagues who have put their selfish interests before their ethics. This calls for us, all of us, to join hands and protect this honorable profession and uphold the rule of law, protect our democracy at all costs, bearing in mind that greed has engulfed our country at all fronts. If we fail to raise our voices and challenge this corruption, we will all be accomplices to the equal collapse of our state. Unfortunately, we are all going to bear the brunt. Our country needs us. We must be part of the solution. It has always been said that great leaders are competent in times of trauma. When the state like ours is gradually collapsing, real leaders rise up to prevent the gradual collapse. They will know how to get the problem out in the open and look for ways to steady the ship and navigate through the troubled waters. I will conclude by saying the successful implementation of the Legal Practice Act is a partnership between progressive organizations like yourselves and sister organization BLA, AFT, and all the other progressive organizations. We may have different styles of approach, but we must all remember that we want to reach the same objectives. Communication is the key to all of this. I wish to thank you and wish you well for the conference. Thank you.
Thank you to our Chair of the Legal Practice Council. I must acknowledge Supreme Court of Appeal President Justice Meyer, who is with us, and also Professor Barney Pityana, who's also joined us. I'm advised that the co-chair of LSSA has sent a message which Comrade Mfana will deliver. Thanks.
Thank you, Program Director, Judge President Mlambo, the DJP Litwaba, Judge Madlanga, the Judge of the Constitutional Court, President Judge Myers, for the President of the Supreme Court of Appeal, President Nochesi, distinguished guest, all protocol observed. This is the statement from the Law Society of South Africa. NADEL has and still remains an important stakeholder in the affairs of the Law Society of South Africa, and most importantly, in the transformation of the legal profession. This conference takes place at a very critical time when the Legal Practice Act is being implemented. The Legal Practice Council has taken over the regulatory function of the profession, and the function and the future role and character of the LSSA is being re-examined. The fundamental issues of transformation of the legal profession remain critical, especially if we are serious about realizing the objective of creating access to justice for those people who are at the margins of our society. The LSSA takes this opportunity to wish NADEL success with its AGM and policy conference, and hope that the resolutions taken in this conference will impact profoundly in our society and in our profession in general. Thank you very much.
Thank you to that message from the LSSA. At this point, I'll call our PALU representative, Ms. Gigi, to come give her message of support.
Good morning. I'm obviously the tallest person here today. Protocol having been observed, I bring you the warm greetings and felicitations of the President and members of the Executive Committee of the Pan-African Lawyers Union, more fondly known as PALU. We are honored to have been invited to join you in your most important event in your annual calendar and I am delighted to be representing Palu here today. Retired United States President Barack Hussein Obama was neither the first nor the last, but has certainly been one of the most prominent people to repeat the truism that Africa needs strong institutions, not just strong men. Building strong institutions takes a lot of time and great effort and requires wisdom, patience, and resilience, amongst others. Frequently bringing members of an association together to meet, fraternize, and network, to discuss issues big and small, monumental and mundane, and together to contribute to the growth of the association is an important and indispensable way of building strong institutions. We thus congratulate you, NADEL, and proffer our solidarity as you undertake this important task. Palu itself, and indeed the current leadership of Palu, also aspires to play their part to continue developing Palu into a strong institution that can properly serve its individual and institutional members and be an asset to the people of Africa generally. And just like you, in addition to myriad initiatives, programs, projects, and activities that go on throughout the year, we prioritize our annual conference, where our members and our friends meet, similarly to get to know each other, network, explore partnerships and collaborations, and deliberate on the important issues of the Union. I must take this opportunity to renew our gratitude and that of our members to the South African legal profession, including the Law Society of South Africa, the Law Society of KwaZulu-Natal, and indeed also the leadership of NADEL, who hosted us impeccably in Durban. And I see quite a few faces that I met at that conference for our July 27 annual conference and triennial General Assembly. It remains to date one of the most successful annual conferences that we have ever held. Thank you. We welcome you, and take a specific note. We welcome you to our 2019 annual conference, which will be held from the 17th to the 20th of July. Take your diaries out. In Lomé, Togo, under the theme, The Future of the Legal Profession in Africa, Effective Tools to Succeed in a Changing Environment. We welcome you all to join us as we discuss the potential future of our profession in a world of great social and technological changes and how these are interacting with the legal profession, including artificial intelligence, robotics, blockchain, etc. In this light, the theme that you have chosen to focus on this year is very appropriate: corruption and the poverty and inequalities that it causes should be very much on our minds as African lawyers, as Africans, and as citizens of the world generally. Indeed, in Durban in 2017, and I'm sure those that attended remember, and I do hope signatures were appended, our council formally adopted the Palu Code of Ethics on anti-corruption and compliance in business relations, and opened it up for signature by individual lawyers and law firms. This contained a set of commitments that lawyers and law firms individually and voluntarily make to eschew corruption and to aspire to the highest ethical standards in their conduct of their profession and business. As part of these standards in their conduct of their profession and as part of this package, the Palu Council also adopted the Memorandum of Understanding on collaboration and cooperation between Palu and lawyer associations, which such lawyers associations voluntarily sign, thereby committing to working with their membership and also collaborating with Palu to provide members with practical resources that enable them to meet the vital commitments that they make by signing this code of ethics. And I hope you find it vital yourself individually to sign this code of ethics. While Palu has made and taken some bold initial steps, we remain open to further critical dialogue and engagement with our members, friends, and stakeholders. And thus, I look forward to the formal and informal discussions and engagements that we will continue to have in the course of this national conference and annual general meeting. Thank you very much. Siyabonga.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gigi. I think this concludes this part of the program of messages of support. I will now invite Comrade Maliwa, who will introduce our guest speaker. And where is Comrade Maliwa?
Program Director, members of the Judiciary, ministers and deputy ministers, invited guests, National Executive Committee of NADEL, led by Comrade Nokesi, President of the PLA, and its delegates, students from different institutions. Mine is to introduce a person that needs no introduction, because by virtue of knowing his name, then you know how capable he is. He was born in Eastern Cape, attending lower classes in the same province, completed BProc and LLB from Wits. He joined the struggle in 1980, fighting against the struggle of apartheid, which is still doing that even now. He also became the executive director in many companies around Gauteng. He's a senior counsel. He is currently the national chairperson of EFF. Ladies and gentlemen, without wasting time, I present to you the Commissar, Advocate Dali Mpofu. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see that red tie you're wearing is not a mistake. Yeah, this is one of those occasions where you really have to say all protocol observed. Yo, and as I say that, I see even more protocol. I should recognize the president of the SCA, the JP, of course, the DJP, Justice Madlanga. Is that Justice Madlanga? He's trying to hide away from me so that I don't recognize him. Yeah. The Deputy Minister, and of course my elder, one of my favorite elders, Dr. Barney, Pityana. I must also recognize all the other guests that are here, but most importantly my dear friend and comrade, the President of NADEL, and everyone else that, if I have not seen you yet, then I see Justice Nomchan. I see, okay, all protocol observed. I think that's the safest way to deal with it. Thank you very much for this invitation. JP, I'm sorry that I missed your address. I would have wanted to hear it. I'm not going to waste much time because I want us to have a Q&A. I've been asked if I'll be prepared to do a Q&A at the end. And I would prefer that kind of interaction rather than, me lecturing you, so to speak. The topic that I've been asked to speak on, can I just read it properly? And I didn't know that I'm the first speaker, so I thought I was going to listen to other people. It says whether judgments or orders must now include leave to appeal in the Concourt and Supreme Court of Appeal, where leave to appeal is refused, a duty to give reasons. I have no doubt as to who put that topic for me to speak on. It must be Mr. Nochesi. Because he knows this is one of my biggest passions, and probably I'm always going on and on about it with him, to such an extent that he thought, okay, I also see the former president of the BLA here, and I think the current president is here. He's also wearing a red tie. Comrade Mabunda. We notice those things this time of the year when... So, and the reason why this is such a subject of passion for me is something that I'm going to explain very, very briefly before we interact on it. Firstly, I'm a big believer that the current practice where the SCA and the Constitutional Court do not have an obligation to give reasons, particularly in respect of applications for leave to appeal, is something that is wrong, abhorrent, unconstitutional, should be abolished, and really cannot stand constitutional scrutiny. I'm putting it as strongly as that. And then I'll qualify why I say so. Remember that one of the most fundamental principles of constitutionalism, or let's go back to first principles. Ours has been described as a constitution which introduces a culture of justification. That's a very important statement. It was succinctly made by one of my professors at university who has since died, Professor Etienne Mureinik. He wrote very, very, very colorfully as to why it is that as a departure from the secrecy and all sorts of things of the apartheid state, the regime that is being introduced by our constitution negates all that and introduces what he called a culture of justification. I like that phrase very much. Now, apart from those broad brush kind of considerations, it is also self-evident that when power of any sort is being exercised in respect of a citizen, the least that citizen must be entitled to is a reason, particularly once that power has been exercised adversely against the said citizen. So, and we take this for granted when it comes to administrative power, for example. Nobody in their right mind can tell you that you are not entitled to reasons from a licensing body that refuses you a license. And that's because it's logically self-evident that you are entitled to those reasons, even for such a small thing like being refused a license. Now, how much more important can it be for you to be given reasons if a decision which might be life-changing, life-threatening even, is being made against you by a court of law of final instance, or any instance for that matter. So I don't think anybody can debate the principle underlying the fact that you should be given reasons. Section 33(2) of our Constitution guarantees the right to be given reasons in respect of administrative decisions. So the question that one must ask then is, in principle, what's the difference between an administrative decision and a judicial one? at least from the point of view of we as lawyers might have all sorts of niceties about how we distinguish those things. But as a citizen, what is the real difference between an administrative decision, in respect of which the right to be given reasons is guaranteed constitutionally in the Bill of Rights, and a judicial decision, which, as we all know, might have 1,000 times more adverse impact, depending, of course, on what it deals with. Now, this is a matter that I think has been trivialized as I say, as a constitutional issue in our jurisprudence. The examples are many of cases where literally, and I'm sure anybody who has practiced law at the levels of the SCA or the Constitutional Court must confess to, at one time or another, having been literally gobsmacked by receiving that punchy one-liner that stabs you in the heart. That simply says, application refused. Boom. If you are lucky, it will say, application is refused because there are no prospects of success. Boom. If you are even luckier, it might say, application refused because it is not in the interest of justice. If you are even luckier, it might say, application refused because it's not in the interest of justice in this particular case or under these circumstances. Then you might have a little bit of, oh, at this stage, yes, that's the, you see, the honorable culprit of, no, Justice Madanga even knows the wording. That's quite right. That's what it says. It says, yeah, it's not in the interest of justice at this stage. Again, you are still in the dark, but at least you know it's just at this stage. Yeah. Now, surely, this cannot be the justification that has been all the justifications that have been given for this practice do not stand logical scrutiny. In some of the decisions there's a decision of Mpahlele, there's another one of Mpahlele is reported, and another one of Greenfields. If you read and there's another one of Bayers, I think Bayers versus the 11 judges or something. In all those judgments, you will be given justifications that range from either the fact that the court in particular is a court of last instance. And that is why there's a qualification, I think, in the Mpahlele judgment that says, in respect of the SCA, that you might be entitled to reasons if it's a constitutional matter. In other words, if in that particular case the SCA is not operating as a court of last instance. Other justifications which have been given are about administrative workload and all sorts of things like that, all of which are quite understandable. But my thesis is that they are not sufficient to justify a denial, not a complete denial of reasons, and not even a right to ask for those reasons, which is really mind-boggling. So even in a special case where you think, okay, I know that there's this general refusal to give reasons, but in this particular case, I would like to have them for this and that reason. There's not even that kind of little leeway that is created. So let's look then at the logic of those justifications. The appeal justification is just, with respect, nonsensical. Because the only reason, or rather, let me put it this way. It cannot be that you are if the only reason you had to receive reasons was for you to be able to execute your right to appeal, then the Constitutional Court should never give reasons. Because the Constitutional Court is a court of last instance, period. So why then does it give reasons in other instances? So that reason is important, but it's certainly not sufficient to justify the rule. And in any event, what happens in the SCA particularly, and I'm glad that the president of the SCA is here, I would go so far as to say the rule of not giving reasons in applications for leave to appeal is invariable. In other words, it's the norm. It's absolute, an absolute rule. I don't know if you insist on those reasons, whether you get them. I don't think you do. Now, the worst thing as well, before we get to the second rationale, is something that is even worse than not being given reasons, is not knowing why you have not been given reasons. So, if you know what I mean. So the reasons for not having the reasons, yeah. And on a serious note, that, let's call that the uncertainty element. I had I'm just going to read out something that is said in a book on constitutional litigation that just illustrates this point. You must just listen to what I'm going to read, but listen to it with the following ears. That actually it's, well, firstly, you don't know when, the Constitutional Court sometimes gives you reasons for refusing leave. So that's the first area of uncertainty, sometimes. I don't know which times, what happens in the other times, you know. And then sometimes they do give you reasons, and as we just said earlier, then they give various explanations, which themselves beg the question. Because if you say it's not in the interest of justice, what does that mean? There could be 20 reasons why it's not in the interest of justice to give leave in a particular case. So I would like to know which one of the 20 possible reasons. Is it because it's not important? Is it because it doesn't raise a constitutional issue? Is it because another court might decide it? Is it what? So I need to know as a litigant why it is. Now, this for me is the best illustration, and it's from this book. It says, this is a book that actually, normally it explains things very crisply, but on this subject, it was like a joke. It says, when refusing leave to appeal without a hearing, the Constitutional Court sometimes delivers a short judgment providing reasons. More often, the court simply gives the order refusing leave. The formulation of the orders varies, giving a possible indication of the reasons of the refusal to leave. The court sometimes expressly states in the order that the leave is refused because the matter has, quote, no prospects of success. At other times, it's simply that it is not in the interest of justice to hear the matter, which may, for example, mean that the court considered that a constitutional issue has been raised for the first time on appeal or not adequately ventilated in the court below. Finally, the formulation that Justice Patlanga was telling us about, that it is not in the interest of justice at this stage, may indicate that the court is not willing to hear the matter before it has been decided by the SCA or another appeal court. I mean, what is that? If a client came to me and said, okay, Mr. Mpofu, I hear that you're saying our leave to appeal was refused. Why? And I gave them this. That client would be entitled not to pay my fees here. Because what are you saying? No, sometimes it given it could be that, I mean, really. So that's the issue. You cannot subject citizens to that kind of uncertainty. It's just not acceptable. Now, the next rationale that you get given is the workload rationale. Now, of course, anybody who has ever worked in a court or even as an acting judge or anything knows that this is not a joke, the workload thing. It's crucial, it's very important. Courts get all sorts of crazy things thrown at them, and unmeritorious appeals and all sorts of things. Fair enough. But once again, all I'm saying is that the antidote for all those things is not a complete refusal of reasons. We must then introduce all sorts of filters, checks and balances and what have you, to ensure that the rubbish stuff that gets thrown into the registrar's office is filtered through, and there's a certain way where deserving cases and so on. Or you might even say a supply of reasons in respect of applications for leave to appeal. You mustn't expect a thesis of 500 pages. It might be that you just need 10 paragraphs, 5 paragraphs, I don't care, 1 paragraph. But surely you must be given reasons why your case has come to an end, when you don't expect it to. So all I'm saying is that there might be other mechanisms through which to deal with even the workload rationale, which is quite understandable. But that cure is not simply to slam in the face of the citizenry, a one-sentence thing that says basically, goodbye, and you are not entitled to know why it's goodbye. Whether this is about your children, whether this is about your life, whether this is about your life and limb, whether this is about a life of 1 million people. No, just go away. It can be. So, okay, one of the solutions to this, in my view, let me put it this way. The solution to this does not lie in the courts, because, as I said, this has been tried in the courts, and the courts just give you this merry-go-round about, no, it cannot be given because it cannot be given, because and so on. So it's clearly not going to lie there. So where does the solution lie? In my humble opinion, it lies with the legislature. It lies with the legislature and maybe the people who make the rules. Because what I call the amelioration of this phenomenon can be achieved through what I call the filtering mechanisms and all that. But if you really want to eliminate it completely, it will have to be legislated that citizens are entitled to reasons when adverse decisions are made against them, whether those adverse decisions are made by administrative bodies, by executive bodies, by judicial bodies, and what have you. I'm deliberately running away from making examples, particularly now that Justice Madlanga is here. But I think I'll make at least one example. Which one should I pick? Maybe I should pick one that is not too controversial. Okay, let me speak. I'll pick the one that Mr. Noches and I were involved in. This is a matter about an ANC conference that was being challenged by delegates to that conference and members of the ANC. The kind of thing that some of us do quite often. Now, this particular conference, well, I don't even have to be cryptic about it. It was the one in the Eastern Cape, because it's otherwise known as the Festival of Chairs. This is where people were thrown with chairs, and you might have seen it on TV. Some of them were, ambulances were called in, and all sorts of things happened there. Now, we had, I was not involved in the matter when it was in the High Court. and I was briefed only to do the application for leave to appeal in the Constitutional Court. And admittedly, the original papers were not the best you could have seen in the world. And I think Mr. Nochesi's counsel in the lower courts, maybe they were operating under pressure, I don't know. But let's just say that there was room for improvement. No, no. I know. Now, be that as it may, we did what we could, to salvage the situation, and drafted quite an extensive application for leave to appeal, not least for the reason that there were these deficiencies. And then, of course, 6 months later, we received the one-liner. And then I couldn't take Mr. Nochesi's calls after that, because I had told him this one is a definite, it's a sure thing, yeah. And that's because the reason I was not taking his calls is because if he asked me why, I would not have been able to tell him. So I don't know what he had to do when he had to deal with the clients. Now the point there is simply this. Cut all the legalese and whether the papers were well drafted and all that. But how do I say to a client, I, not someone else, I had in the Constitutional Court a case where there were irregularities in an ANC conference, and the order of those irregularities was there was no quorum in a meeting and that kind of thing. And I was given a judgment in the Free State in that case, which was so abhorrent that for the first time, I did something that I had not done at that stage. I applied to the Constitutional Court directly, urgently. Now, anyone who practices that court knows that each one of those things you are likely to be knocked back. Yeah. A direct appeal, but also on an urgent basis. And I got a hearing. Not only did I get a hearing, I got success in the leading case of Ramakatsa. And now, here we have another case, similar facts. People have actually been injured. Blood has been flowing literally in front of people. You've seen it on TV. All sorts of calamities have occurred. And now, I'm not given a hearing. A hearing, not to win. We can win or lose, whatever, that's another story. But just to be given a hearing as to whether or not this qualifies as a regular conference. How do you explain that to a lay person? Well, you can't even explain it to me, let alone to a lay client who really wants justice. And let me end that story by saying this. I have no doubt in my mind that there were valid reasons why the Constitutional Court rejected the appeal in the Eastern Cape case and accepted it in the Free State case. I have no doubt about that. That's not my complaint. My complaint is that I don't know what those reasons are, standing here. Neither does Mr. Nochesi, neither to the clients. That's the issue. It's not that, I'm not saying the Constitutional Court was just thought, this one is from the Eastern Cape, so let's not do it. Surely, it was not something like that. So there must be a valid, very good, proper reason somewhere. But that's the problem. Why is that reason somewhere hidden in Braamfontein? And we don't know about it. The people who are affected by it don't know about it. So that's my piece. It's an issue that I really want to take up at a broader level. I'm writing an article on it. Maybe I'll also write, I've made notes of this speech. I'll also write something around this address. But I'm doing a more comprehensive research of other jurisdictions, Australia, Canada, and so on this issue. But it's one that I'm a crusader of. And if anything, I'm here to canvass you to be a co-crusader. But of course, there's another way to resolve this. It is to just make sure that after May, you have a different Minister of Justice. Thank you. We'll take into
It's very passionate. It's even, I think, going beyond the scope of the topic we gave and conversing. This is an interesting and important thing. I don't know if there are, I think we'll allow about 2-3 people who have short comments to make. And yeah, can the mics rove? I'm noting you there, Makangela. Do we have another hand, that corner there? And you, okay, we'll take those 3, okay? Yes.
Thank you. I'm now, I think I agree with Advocate Mpofu. You know, 2 things that I want to comment on. One, the reason why one goes to court is because you made mention of the administrative decisions, because you are challenging the rationality of a particular decision. Contrary, the courts can't give reasons for their decisions. It doesn't make sense to me. Secondly, just my language is intimidating me. Secondly, for any matter that serves before a judge, the judge is always having a prima facie view. But once you get into the courtroom, you have an obligation now to persuade that judge to see the things the way you see them. Now, if you don't get an audience, you just get that one line. I've received some from the SCA. You know, it's one line. Just one line. Sometimes it's a half a line. Then you can see there were 2 judges. It's even worse. Remember, the losing party will always say, those judges. But the winning party, those judges are good. Now you can now imagine if you were not even afforded that opportunity to go and try to convince them to say, no. In fact, this is not how this thing came about, because we've got a certain belief, but we just want to be heard. I agree that it's not about the outcome, but it's about how did they arrive at that particular decision. Now, it can be that courts, I mean, as I say, for me, my logic, I'm drawing the logic from, you are challenging the government institution for a decision, but the court can't give a reason for its own decision. Where do we go from there? So I am for that for every order, there must be at least a reasoning behind that particular order, so that you get to know that these judges are coming from this particular direction. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm noting a comrade there. If people can just say who they are and stick to the 2 minutes. Thanks.
Oh, thank you. My name is Jan. I'm from Bloemfontein. The SCA is at a very close proximity, and it is indeed frustrating that sometimes one, after getting the order dismissing application for leave to appeal, impulsively one would want to go across the road and find the reasons. But the point I'm trying to make is that if the issue of workload plays any role here, maybe one should look at how many matters are being dealt with without having to file papers to court because of the reasoning behind judgments we get from the court. So in other words, if we get reasons, some of the matters are not even gonna get to the SCA because we'll be able to advise our clients accordingly, and some of those matters will ease the workload of the judges. I am saying giving of reasons is very educational and important. Lastly, it deals with the question of transparency, because sometimes one wonders whether the matter was given any attention at all. So I can join the crusade of Advocate Dali Mpofu in order to get this matter dealt with. Thank you.
Tia, I think you're the last one.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I am Tia. I want to concur fully with the latter speakers on this matter, because I just imagine, Mr. Nokesi, your case is dismissed from Constitutional Court, one sentence. What are you going to say to the clients? What are you going to learn in terms of knowing that I must improve and do better come tomorrow? I want to also join on the same breath that we must really appeal to you, Honorable Minister, and the judges, that these reasons are necessary. They will also encourage litigation. I wish JP was still inside the room. There is a question he once asked to some candidate in the interviews of JSC, that you want to be a judge, you are a senior counselor, a black senior counselor. We're having a crisis in Gauteng of advocates, black advocates, who do not litigate, whom I can say they are RAF consultants. Now you want to be a judge. Are you not reducing from the legal that we have as judges? One of the reasons is because our judges do not encourage litigation. You go to court, you got dismissed badly, and tomorrow you will not even want to go there again. I come from Mtata, for argument's sake. The town is full of potholes, dirtiness everywhere. I see those things, I discuss them with the president. President will assist me, I write a letter to the municipality. I will look for an advocate who want to go to court to compel municipality or whatsoever, that they must act and do what they are supposed to do. Hey, but you will think when you arrive at the court, but hey, I will be lambasted here. And then you will think twice and end up not fulfilling the duties that JP in his welcome that we are supposed to do as lawyers. So I want to agree with you, Fighter Chairperson, but I disagree with you on this one of changing the voting for a different minister, but we can discuss age only. We can't continue with 73 years old ministers. We want to be ministers ourselves. Thank you.
Okay. Is there a contrary view? People have concurred with the speaker. Is there a contrary view? Then we can just find I take it that's contrary to the suggestions that have been made.
Thank you. I don't necessarily think it's a contrary view, but just from the perspective of the judges, not that I'm trying to protect the judges here, I think they can protect themselves, but the reasoning why I believe no reasons are given is because those judges who look at the papers, look at the judgment, obviously coincide and agree with the judgment that was found in favor of the respondent. And based on that, they believe that the judge who wrote the judgment gave sufficient reasons, and because of that, that might be one of the reasons why they believe they should not give reasons, because they are in agreement with the judgment given by the court that's given the judgment. Thank you.
Okay, I'll give you to have your closing.
Thank you. You are a very brave man. No, that reason doesn't hold water. Let me tell you that that reason was given, I think, in the Greenfields case in other words, the logic is that, look, since you are now appealing to, in other words, they said something like this, You are not really appealing against the SCA's rejection of your application for leave to appeal. When, let's say, when you now go to the Constitutional Court, what you are really appealing against is the original judgment. That's what you are saying. Is the original judgment. Sorry.
I want to disrupt you.
Okay.
We want to give Justice Maya a say, then you can conclude.
Oh, afterwards. Okay, of course. Yeah. Sure. Sorry. Okay, I'm going to deal. Let's hear what Justice Maya is going to say, but I disagree with you here.
Okay.
Not with her, but just with you. Yeah.
I think we'd like to give the President,
Okay.
the right
Well,
to reply. Right of reply.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Although I would have preferred that he responds to the question he was dealing with first, but it's fine. Mr. Mpofu, you have literally stirred the hornet's nest, so to speak, and the issues you raise are critical. Let me just say I don't disagree with you, but I don't want us to gloss over the practicalities of the situation. I just want to pack this information with you. Last year alone, the Supreme Court of Appeal dealt with over 200 appeals. That's just a very conservative estimate. I don't have the actual numbers offhand now. And it disposed of over 1,000 applications for leave to appeal. Now, Deputy Minister Jeffrey knows my concerns about this particular issue. A few years ago, the Superior Courts Act introduced yet another layer of applications for leave to appeal at the level of the SCA by introducing Section 17(2)(f), which entitles a litigant whose application for leave to appeal has already been denied by 2 SCA judges to petition the President. Now, I'm saying to you, last year alone, the SCA had over 1,000 applications for leave to appeal. And there are valid reasons for the enactment of Section 17(2)(f), which I don't dispute, but it's problematic, and I've expressed my concerns about it. Now, what is happening today is that most of the petitioners whose petitions have been refused by those 2 judges applied to the President of the Supreme Court of Appeal. It's an anomalous situation, 1 judge having the power to overturn, 2. Anyway, now, I get a deluge of applications for leave to appeal in that area, in addition to all the other work I must do. Now, I just want to hear your views on this. How would it ever be possible for the ordinary SCA judges and me to provide reasons in all these matters? Thank you.
You must understand that, let's say if you get an order from the Constitutional Court, in the Constitutional Court you find out there are 11 judges that considers that application for leave to appeal. At the end, you only get that 1 sentence in that order. Does that mean each of those 11 people had the same reason on the matter? Though, I mean, I accept that they can have the same conclusion, but definitely the reason might have been different.
Yeah.
So I would like you to consider this.
Okay, I see. I think it's better that I respond. This is really the more interesting part. So I think Justice Madlanga also wanted to give an input, so I'll speak after.
Justice, or rather President Maya, I too will not engage on the desirability, that is the pros and cons of giving reasons. What I will do is to speak to what I will call structural issues, and perhaps more crucially, not just structural, it's actually constitutional issues. As everybody knows, the Constitutional Court sits and bank everything we decide we have, all 11 of us have to decide it, or at the very least, 8, which is what in terms of the Constitution is the quorum, yeah. Now, when I was acting in the Constitutional Court 2001, they did not receive that many cases, but right now, especially since after 23 August 2013, when we were given what I would call general jurisdiction, we have a deluge of applications for leave to appeal. Now, if we have to decide and bank, and if we were to have to give reasons in each one of the matters that we do, how would that happen? Now, if we were able to sit in panels, perhaps it would be more practical to do it. I'm not saying it would be easy. It would probably still be very difficult. Now, this raises the important constitutional question of those that decided initially that the Constitutional Court should sit and bank. What informed that decision? So it's not an easy matter to resolve. It's a matter that perhaps would even require that that very antecedent question be revisited. I'm not saying it must be revisited. I'm just saying it's not, it's not just a matter that you can wake up tomorrow and say, the Constitutional Court must give reasons.
Okay, thank you very much. I think those are useful inputs. And I have no problem whatsoever with anything that has been said here. But I think it begs the very question that I'm raising. So when I say, for example, that it needs legislative intervention, I'm saying exactly what Justice Madlanga is saying. In other words, what you need to do is to revisit the whole thing. I think that's the problem sometimes with piecemeal legislation, if you like. Because, you solve one problem, and maybe that problem we can put at the door of Parliament. Sometimes you try to solve one problem, but you create another. And I think that's illustrated by the example that President Maya makes of Section 17(2)(f) of the Superior Courts Act. Because that section was clearly intended to, in favor of the litigants and the public, so that you have another bite at the cherry and even another one. Yeah. In other words, you get rejected, you apply, the 2 judges then reject you, you still can go to the president. Great, all admirable. But what that then does is to create the overload issue, which I acknowledged in my main address is a serious issue. But with respect, all I'm saying is that the solution to all those problems is not a refusal of reasons. If it's a question of there are not enough judges, then let's employ more judges. If it's the size of the Constitutional Court, well, let's increase the size, or the SCA for that matter, whatever. If it's the provision of the en banc sitting of constitutional judges, let's change that. But you cannot disadvantage the citizenry for practical reasons, just because it's not convenient and so on. And I know that, a minister will tell us, there are many demands in society. You can't just say, well, we want 20,000 schools, so therefore let's build them. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that let's apply our minds to the solution of the actual problem, rather than finding ourselves imprisoned necessarily by the current structure. For example, why is it that the SCA is able to assign 2 judges out of, how many judges are there? 25 now. Yes, out of 25 judges, it's able to assign 2 judges to deal with an application for leave to appeal, which is a great thing because it creates division of labor and more capacity. As the president said, it still doesn't resolve the problem because these things come flooding. But at least you are able, imagine if they said in the SCA you must also have 5 judges sitting, a full bench as it were. That problem would be much more exacerbated. Why, if it can be reduced to 2 judges in the SCA, why is it en banc in the Constitutional Court? Why? If anybody can give me a reason for that, there cannot never be let's put it, an insurmountable reason why that is the case. And that's the point that Justice Matlanga is making. He's not proposing for legislative change or whatever, but he's saying those are some of the practicalities that they face, which are quite understandable. So for me, the bottom line, any reason, all I want is anyone must give me a reason that supersedes the rights of people to get the reasons that they deserve. And that explains the jurisprudential difference between an entitlement to reasons in the case of administrative decisions adverse to you and judicial ones. I don't think it exists. And okay, I won't spend much on the people who agree with me, but but the question of audience that is raised by the first person is very important. I mean, that's a topic for another day, whether you should be given audience or not. But I'm not even there. I'm simply saying just the question of reasons. Excellent contribution that says, actually being given reasons might not only assuage the feelings of the litigants, but also negate the need for any further appeal, because the reasons might just explain exactly, you'll be able to say to your client, look, it is indeed the end of the road because of A, B, C, D, and so on. And the other point I want to emphasize is what I said, that it might be that this right to reasons must be qualified. I don't know. It might not be absolute or the same, or you might be only be entitled to a cryptic note of 10 points or bullet points or whatever. I don't care. But at least you must know what it is. And that might be a question of increasing the personnel as well. But the problem, the conceptual problem is this thing about appeals, thinking that the only reason why we deserve reasons is because you want to appeal. There are many reasons: legitimacy of the system, the public confidence in the system, the accuracy of decisions. When any judge will tell you, if you have to give reasons, you concentrate your mind. You don't just, it's easy, for example, in the urgent court to say the thing is not urgent because you're not going to give any reasons. But when you're going to have to give reasons which are going to be scrutinized by the public and your peers and other people, naturally, it increases the quality of the decision. But more importantly for this audience, and I hope there are students here and young lawyers, more importantly, all of us have become lawyers because we learn from those big law reports behind us. That's how you learn. That's how you advise clients. You advise clients, you don't just read a statute to the client and say, yeah, this is what it says. You say, well, this is what it says, but this is also how the courts have looked at it, blah, 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 and so on. So how are you going to not repeat the same mistake? How are you going to learn and make sure that the administration of justice improves if you don't know why a particular reason was given? But more importantly, in a country like this where there are poor people, I don't know if you realize what it takes for a litigant, a lay litigant. I'm not even talking about poor people, a rich person. What it takes to do an application for leave to appeal in the SCA or in the Constitutional Court. Those of you who are attorneys will know that it used to be you have to put 25 copies. In one case, I kid you not, we made 50,000 pages. Because of that thing of you have to do 25 copies of this and that, and then there are 10 other parties that you must also be served. 50,000. I was watching the attorneys doing this. And you go through all that, the lawyers spend months and months drafting, you do 50,000 pages, you spend 500,000 of your money, and then you get one line. Goodbye. No, it can't be right. Thank you. Okay, the Acting Justice of the Constitutional Court, Justice Lujoba, I believe, wants to say something, and I'll give the Deputy Minister, no? Okay, I'll give you Deputy Minister a say, and then we close.
No, thanks. I think it is, it's something that we need to debate more. And we in particular need to have a variety of views, particularly the judges from the higher courts. But just a couple of things. One to Dali, I don't know if it's party politics, but you kept referring to, you know, the rights of citizens. But let me remind you that our Constitution, the Bill of Rights applies, most of those rights apply to all people in South Africa, not just citizens. So it might reflect on the EFF's electoral manifesto. But look, the main issue I wanted to raise just with the en banc issue, because Dali kept wanting a, why do we have en banc? Well, firstly to Judge Meyer, let's see what, have there been miscarriages of justice that have been corrected because of this provision of, what is it, section 17, whatever, 2F. But let's review how it's worked. But I think that's what it was there for. If a lower court unreasonably refuses, and the SCA as well, were the miscarriages that could be corrected. The en banc issue, I mean, look, it is a resources question. We are unusual in South Africa in terms of having a high court, an appeal court, and a constitutional court. It came because of our history. But the reason for me why the Constitutional Court needs to sit en banc is because it's the final court. You can't have different panels of the Constitutional Court sitting and coming up with different positions. You need them all to sit and resolve something. Otherwise, you could, if you get that panel, it could go that way. If you get another panel, it could go a different way, and I think that would create uncertainty. But the main point I want to make is let's engage, let's debate on the issue, let's hear all views. But please, Advocate Mpofu, we can't rush things.
Okay, I think I can tell you in the next government we'll keep the Deputy Minister. Yeah. We'll just have a new minister. This guest of ours hasn't got manners. I am the chair, and Dr. Lay, you wanted to say something? Yes? This is one of the founding members of NADEL, so
yes,
granting an indulgence.
Perhaps part of the solution lies in the fact that shouldn't we pass this on to the Law Reform Commission to investigate this? And everyone will share their views, and ultimately they may find the solution that we're looking for.
I think we are done. I think we're done. Yeah, we're closing the session now. I will ask Opoki to just give to our guest. I understand that he has time constraints. At this stage, I will call on Yugeshni. I'm not sure where you're seated, to introduce our next speaker. Our tea break is going to be at 11:30. If people can bear with us, and then, yeah, you have to.
Good morning, honorable guests. I take it as all protocol is observed. Comrades, addressing us in this session is Professor Barney Pityana. Professor Pityana has a history of human rights activism. He's an academic and a lawyer. He holds a doctorate in law. He served as the chairperson of the South African Human Rights Commission from 1995 to 2001. He has also served in the Commission on Human and People's Rights at the Organization of African Union. There will simply be not enough time if I had to read his entire CV. I must, however, make mention, comrades, that today we will be listening to an exponent of the Black consciousness movement. Together with Stephen Bantu Biko, Professor Pityana was a founding member of the student movement, SASO, the South African Students' Organization. In a Fees Must Fall interview, Professor Pityana made the statement that the collapse in the socio-economic environment is so phenomenal that we need students in the forefront to transform a hugely unequal society. In that interview, he posed the question, ideologically, what is it that we want to do to make a country more equal and a more egalitarian society? He is here today to shape our conference, discussions on the topic, a better South Africa will only be realized once inequalities cease to exist. We welcome you, Professor Pityana.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I can assure you that I have no interest in what happens on the 8th of May. Whoever is a Minister of Justice is just an incidental matter for me. Mr. President of NADEL and the executive of NADEL, thank you very much for the invitation to join you once again today in your annual conference. Like others, I actually appreciate the august body that is here of the leadership of the judiciary, of our legal professions, and others. And so it is a great honor to be here today. I do apologize for having just put your program a little bit out of joint because I requested to speak earlier than originally scheduled. And therefore, I actually lose the joy of sharing with other panelists that would have been with me. Thank you very much. Let me start, however, on an idiosyncratic note. As I grow older, and I do grow older, and as our constitutional democracy progresses in fits and starts, I find myself becoming skeptical about the prospects of law transforming the nature and character of our society for the better, or at least to realize the ideals set out in our Constitution. I also disclose that I often subject myself to a rationality and ethical check against becoming a rather cynical old man. In other words, I need to continue to believe, as I have always done, that it is possible to transform society for the better, and that as a citizen, it is my duty to be part of society's efforts to be better than the past was. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm old enough to know that the struggle we waged against apartheid was predicated on the belief that our destiny as South Africans was a societal ethos radically opposed to and qualitatively different from that which British colonialism and apartheid and everything else that went before us had made of humanity in our country. I also realized that not everything in traditional African society was ideal, but I recognize that like all societies, it was bound to develop. I was moved to be part of the struggle against apartheid, not so much because apartheid had to come to an end, and it did, and anything else thereafter would do. As a young activist of my time, I reasoned that we deserved to become more wholly human, to live in equality, to promote development and sustainability, to create a just relationship with all humanity and with the world that environed us, to seek peace and justice, to amass the wealth of the land and its resources for a land that realized its own ambitions. Where I am today, though, not only do I have the sense that for many of our leaders, the purpose of living is more about ascendancy and material acquisitions for its own sake, and the inequality and suffering of many does not seem to disturb the conscience. Instead, we have become an aggressively filthy, selfish, individualistic society that cares only for itself and its own. For one thing, one would have hoped that freedom in our lifetime would bring benefits like peace and security, less inclination towards crime and criminality, a more equal sharing of the goods of the earth, a more caring society that provides opportunities in health and education, in death and dying. Like many, I have watched this nation go through the convulsions of moral outrage about the violations of those values that we had understood that our new democratic ideals defined. Honesty, that we leave nobody behind, we lift others as we rise. In other words, a moral and a humane society. More alarmingly, we produce leaders who were outrageously immoral, who had no belief in the moral system we sought to establish, who were not interested in democracy at all, or to subject themselves to democratic and constitutional accountability, who manipulated and violated all systems of law to suit their own ends, and who raided the public purse, not to make the life and being of the state better, but to amass wealth for themselves and their own, and who engaged power for the sole purpose of protecting themselves from public scrutiny. We knew that women were being raped in our society, that children were being abused, that far too many of us were becoming visibly rich without accounting for the source of our wealth, that our streets were no longer safe, our own homes had become not just our own castles, but more like prisons, often invaded by criminality. We knew that public resources were being used not so much to make sure that our children went to school and the sick and the poor and vulnerable were attended to, that the poor were in decent housing. Society had organized itself into power cliques and elites. Through all of this, it seems to me, far too many of us live as if these matters are in fact not happening. We are in denial, or we have ceased to believe any longer in that which propelled our struggle. Like the Cuban writer Leonardo Padura, who in his biographical novel on the life and times of Leon Trotsky says this, talking as he did about the Stalinist years in the Soviet Union, and I quote, "The great utopia was corrupted. That process in which so many invested their hopes, in which so many lost their dreams, their years, their blood, and their lives." Elsewhere, Padura observes that such a society degenerates in its ideals when thinking is criminalized. Padura records reflectively a conversation between Ramon, the assassin, who presumably was then safely back in Moscow, and the agent who recruited him, Leonid, both of whom were now living in fear. "Think," Leonid said, and pointed at the sky, more or less from where the supposed order to think was supposed to come from. "Here," he said, "people almost never think. Thinking is a luxury that is forbidden to the survivors. To escape the fear, it has always been best not to think." "You don't exist," Ramon said he. "Neither do I," unquote. I say this only to record that as one trained in the heyday of the confidence we had in the law, in the ambitions we had that the law would change the reality around us, in the commitment to become radical in what we did and how we thought and how we acted, in the commitment that we had that actually it was possible to change what society was to become different and better than in fact it was. So those of us who come from that era some 50 years ago, in my case, I've now come to realize that law, indeed all law, is more about how it projects the interests of those in power, how law is unable to help society to realize its own ideals. Somehow law is incapable of transformation of itself and of society at large. The principles of constitutionality and law soon become sedated, and the people become subjects who conform and comply. I'm troubled that our society has just not been able to eliminate racism, for example, and tribalism, because race essentialism and ethnic chauvinism are very much with us 25 years into our constitutional democracy. I'm troubled that leaders in our society still speak about race as if they were reading straight out of the book of Hendrik Verwoerd. In 25 years of democracy, far too many of our people go to bed hungry at night. Some die in the streets. Some die in the queues in hospital, waiting to receive a Panado. Our criminal justice system does not appear to have dealt a decisive blow to the prevailing and prevalent injustice. Watching the shenanigans that reveal themselves on our TV screens in the Zondo Commission, the PIC, VBS, ESCOM, you name it, and I ask myself, where do these people come from? It reads like stuff out of a novel or a soapy meant to entertain, to numb our sensitivity. But alas, it is a horror movie. For the story, it becomes a story of our lives. W.B. Du Bois is in a critique of the Reconstruction period in American history following the Civil War, a period that saw the freedom of slaves, but who faced the challenge of both living like free men and women, the challenge of being accepted as such, the challenge of learning indeed to be free. Du Bois says that, and I quote, public reasoning, qua citizenship, teaches a nation the value of its own ideals, leading to the democratic development of the antebellum United States, unquote. This is the point. Public reason qua citizenship teaches a nation the value of its own ideals. And that, I think, is the core of the matter, is that we need to kind of learn over again to value the ideals of this nation, to understand them, to articulate them. What I understand by this is that for the black people in our country, in America, freed from slavery, they remained enslaved as long as they failed to reason their freedom and to live in a manner that challenges the democratic pretensions of America. For him, this was to claim the recognition of the birthright, to mount a legitimate challenge to, and I quote, the institutional rationality of ethical life for the sake of realizing the civic equality of all. Ultimately, the calling that we all have is really and truly to live like free men and women, because freedom is not defined by spelling. It is defined by the way we live and we conduct ourselves. This means, in my view, that the realization of freedom is being free itself. Being free does not depend on institutions or on traditions, because by their nature, such institutions and traditions were never in themselves the instruments of our freedom in the first place. It has to do, I think, with the reasoned mind of resistance and challenge to the normative instruments of the establishment. So to resist to become the establishment is in fact an exercise of freedom itself. In a very real sense, we have lost, I think, that passion for freedom that once propelled so many of us in our young lives to give up almost everything. To make matters worse, that has happened so soon even within living memory, of those struggles, even by some of those who presumably participated in them. 25 years, there are just far too many people who actually live with and recall what it took to bring us to where we are today. But you think if you go out there, that nobody really remembers. It was like it's 100 years ago. Nobody living remembers where we come from. And the amazing immorality of amnesia, in a sense, is what makes us to be where we are. If law then is to have any meaning at all, I suggest, it will then have to be the means by which South Africans are reminded of the need constantly to refresh their ideals and indeed to realize them. I want to suggest also that in 25 years, we have lost the idealism, the power of seeking and believing only in the best that is possible. The idealism, just the power of believing and living only the best that is possible. In other words, never to stop short of what is best and never to stop short of what is possible. Democracy, then, in my view, has lost its transformative meaning, its transformative power. And law is no longer a tool for the realization of democracy's highest aspirations. And let me put it bluntly. The battle that is waging in our country right now is about whether we believe any longer, if we ever did, that it is possible for this society to find it within itself to build the bridges that are necessary to make a common life possible and to become something functionally and fundamentally better than that which we inherited. W.B. Du Bois puts it this way, and I quote, "The public assertion of rights and social privileges, ethically appropriate to citizenship, puts citizens in conflict with each other about the ideal normative mutuality that should come to define their civic community and direct positive activities of the state." And so what we are really called upon to do today is to define and redefine that normative mutuality of what actually living in this new South Africa is actually about, and to actually seek and search it so that we can more meaningfully engage in the art of creating a future. My friends, I read the manifestos of all the political parties. Believe me, I have. And I think, quite frankly, Deputy Minister, it is words and words and more words. I despair. I despair because I also think that none of them are taking us into their confidence about the true nature of the state of this nation. I'm often reminded of Amilcar Cabral, and I quote, "Hide nothing from the masses of our people, tell no lies, expose lies whenever they are told, mask no difficulties, mistakes or failures, claim no easy victories," unquote. They are telling us, these manifestos, that this is a broken nation, a dysfunctional system of law and public administration, a people indeed at war with themselves. They do not call us to united action, to build, and continue to build. They are not rallying this nation into unity about a common purpose and a shared future. They are not reminding us of our highest ideals and the most sacred responsibility that we have. Somehow we are sold the illusion that more of the same will save us. I do not believe it. Again, taking a leaf out of Cabral, we're reminded that to achieve results, we must be clear in our independence of thought and action. Cabral says this of the PAIGC, his party, that this party, in order to succeed and have value, and I quote, will have to be capable and must constantly be more so of thinking deeply about our programs, not the superficiality that I read in so many of those manifestos that I have come across. We need to think deeply about the nature of this society, be analytical and truthful in confronting the challenges that we face, so as to be able to act correctly, to act strongly, so as to be able to think more clearly, unquote. That is Amilcar Cabral. This, I suggest, is what I am missing in South Africa today. To be candid, that is exactly what brought us to the morass and quagmire of failure that we have been in the last decade at least. If we're not careful, I believe me, history is capable of repeating itself. As I end this, I have 3 things to say about the shape of our future as a nation. First, that we must discover our freedom. Somehow we need to believe that 1994 marked a state of freedom for all in our country. I go in the universities today, the critique that I get from the young activists of fees must fall and elsewhere, is that actually it's as if 1994 really didn't happen. It was just an illusion. Believe me, 1994 did happen. Whatever else happened afterwards, but 27th April 1994 did happen. So it was, in fact, a mark of our freedom. I'm saying we must not ever look back like the wife of Lot. We must shape and give meaning to our freedom, because if we don't, then nobody else will. We must understand clearly that our freedom is a collective responsibility. And if I may put it more clearly, that our freedom depends on us and nobody else. The second thing I want to suggest is that we must recover and articulate the lost vision. We must pull it back, because by and large, we've lost that vision. Whatever was driving for many of us the liberation struggle, whatever got us to we've lost it. We need to be honest about that. That's gone. That has gone with the materialism, with the rat race, it's gone with the upmanship that has become a measure of our society, with the greed, it's gone. And we need to recover that vision, and we must articulate it afresh. And so if that is so, then, we must really work on that vision that today is no longer propelled by the idealism that captures the imagination. The reason that I read the manifestos, and I don't have a sense of imagination at all, I don't have a sense of where do these people want to take this country to. And this idea of the imagination is just gone. That vision, I believe, is the vision, if I may say so, that is stated in our Constitution. That South Africa is one sovereign democratic state founded on the following values: human dignity, the achievement of equality, the advancement of human rights and freedoms, non-racialism, non-sexism. A lot of what we've seen in the last 10 years is exactly a contradistinction to all that I've just said. But we lived in the belief that we're living the Constitution, but we're not. Frankly, we are no longer capable of taking and reflecting intelligently today about the national question, about what we used to do in the liberation struggle. The national question was the big intellectual issue. To really, what is the national question? These days, we're not even capable of talking intelligently about social cohesion, perhaps except when elections are about to appear around the horizon. We've become even more of a divided, of a racially stratified, tribalized, ethnically chauvinistic society that we ever have been, I dare say, even under apartheid. We have no policies in place that promote intelligently and meaningfully social cohesion and a common nationhood. We bemoan the past, but we fail to live our vision for the future. We need, I think, courage and boldness about addressing and eliminating all forms of inequality. In 25 years, where there had been progress, we have seen the reversal of our fortunes, especially in the last decade. We need law and democracy that works for the people, that works for the poorest and the most vulnerable and the most marginal of our people. It seems to me this is not much of what I see today. There are far too many people in our country who believe that politics is a dirty game, who believe that the law cannot be trusted, who believe that the church is where evil reigns supreme, and they are right. We must take steps seriously to help society to assert its own humanity, to strive for the integrity of the human person. For that to happen in a liberating manner, we must be reminded of our civic responsibility. That must change if we are ever to have a shot at the future. And so, to come to an end, I say, therefore, that the starting point, and it's never too late to mend, is exactly what Amilcar Cabral and the PAIGC did. And they believed that the foundations for the party and the future of Cape Verde and of Guinea-Bissau was this: to reach out and make sure that the best sons, the very best sons and daughters of our land must lead our party. That our people, our struggle demands enlightened leadership. And we have said the best sons, and he repeats himself, and we have said the best sons and daughters of our land must lead, unquote. I dare say we've done exactly the opposite. We've gone for the least able people to make them president of our country. And we are totally and completely complicit in the mess that we found ourselves in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. In my language, you know, I think it's what you've shared with us, so we will take into the open discussions just before lunch. We will ponder the questions that you have raised and really discuss what it is that the law can do or lawyers can do to make sure that we do have that better or the best society. At this stage, I would like to acknowledge people who have joined us during the proceedings. Advocate Nolkanyiso Jele, who is advisor to the President Ramaphosa. Also, the former public protector, Advocate Tudi Madonsela, has also joined us. We welcome you. I noticed that we've already given Prof. Pityana our token of appreciation. Thank you so much for that speech that you just